Hi, this is Lindsay the Crafty Blonde, and for today's video I've got a 5 cards 1 kit using the Crafty Ola Just For You special edition card kit. So for my first card I'm taking a piece of blue card and I'm cutting that to 14 centimetres by 11.5 centimetres. Then I'm taking a piece of paper and that is cut to 13.5 centimetres by 11 centimetres, and then a darker piece of paper which I'm cutting to 13.5 centimetres by 5 centimetres. Then I'm using my die cutting machine to cut a square from another piece of paper that is approximately 8 centimetres by 8 centimetres. I'm then taking a piece of blue card and using a large rectangular scalloped die, I'm cutting a border just out of the blue card, so I've got a scallop just down the one side. I'm then taking a bit of glue and just adding that larger piece of paper onto the blue card. And then I'm taking the scalloped border and just adding the paper onto there. And then I'm just going to trim the top and the bottom off just so it's level with the paper. And then I'm just going to pop that onto the panel just towards the left hand side. And then taking some foam pads, just popping those on the back of the square and popping that in sort of like the top third of the card. Then I'm taking my card blank, which is a 6x6, and with the fold at the top I'm trimming that down to 12 centimetres wide, and then with a bit of glue adding that pattern panel onto the front of the card. Then I've taken the sentiment toppers and I'm just adding the Just For You in the top right hand corner of the square, and then I'm just having a look at which rosettes I want to use and where I want to place them. And then just finishing off with a few pearls. So then I decided that the square faded too much into the background, so I cut a scallop square from blue card, popped the panel onto there, then added that onto my card and repositioned the rosettes. And that's my first card. So for my second card, I'm taking my die cutting machine and cutting a rectangle which is approximately 12.5 by 6 out of one piece of paper, and then 3 squares which are approximately 4 by 4 out of different papers. I'm then cutting my main background paper which is 13.5 by 12, and cutting a piece of blue card which is 14 by 12.5, and I'm just matting that background paper onto the card there. Then I'm just positioning where I want those sort of die cut pieces to be, and then with a fine marker I'm just doodling a border around the edges of the background paper and up both the large rectangle and the 3 squares. So then I'm taking the large rectangle and the 3 squares and I'm just adding foam pads onto the back of those and then popping them onto that panel, just positioning them so they're all nice and level. Now once I've got the first square on, when I'm trying to put the second one on, just so I can get them all nice and straight, I'm just lining that panel up behind my ruler, and then obviously I can pop my square down and make sure that the bottom of the 3 squares is all nice and level. Then I'm taking a 6x6 card blank and I'm cutting that down to 13 centimetres and just adding that panel there onto the top. Then I've got the pearl brads, and what I've decided to do is cut the legs off the back, and then just with a pair of scissors just sort of pop the end bits back down in there, so there's no sharp edges sticking out. And then I'm adding a double foam pad on the back of each brad, and then popping those into each of the squares. Then I've taken the Dovecraft Happy Birthday banner sentiment stamp. I'm just inking that up with a bit of VersaFine ink, and then I'm going to stamp that onto white card, and then very carefully just cut round, so I've just got a very thin border. And then I'm going to mat that onto blue card, and again just cut round, so I've got a very thin blue border around the sentiment. And I'm placing that in the bottom right hand corner of the rectangle with just a couple of foam pads. And then I'm taking the rosettes again and just having a look at which ones I want and where I want to place them. And then just to finish off, I'm just adding a few pearls just in the corners. And that's my second card. So for my third card, I'm taking a 6x6 card blank, and again with the folds at the top, I'm cutting that down to 12 centimetres wide. Then I'm taking a piece of the floral paper, and I've cut that to 11.5 centimetres wide, and I've stuck that on the front of my card blank and then just trimmed the bottom. I'm then taking another piece of paper which is cut to 8 centimetres wide. I'm just marking where that needs to be, as in terms of the length of the card. And then what I'm doing is just very faintly marking on that panel where the centre point is. And then what I'm going to do is take that panel and I'm going to die cut 3 circles from the centre. And then I'm taking some red card and using the large rectangular scallop die, I'm going to cut, so I've got 2 scallop borders from that card. Then with a little bit of double-sided tape, I'm just going to add the borders to the back of that panel. Then I'm just trimming the ends off just to get it nice and level with the paper. Just positioning that there so I've got the birds the right way round. And then I'm just going to add some foam pads to the back of the panel and place it on the card blank so I've got it down the centre. Then I've taken the sentiment toppers and I've chosen the circular with love, and I'm placing that in the middle aperture. And then I've taken the pearl brads and again I've cut the backs off, adding a double foam tape onto the back of there and popping one in the top and one in the bottom of those circular apertures. And then just to finish off, I'm just going to randomly add a couple of gems. Then I decided that the circles weren't really popping out, so I've took a circular die and a scallop circular die, and then running those through my Big Shot machine, I've cut them out so I've got some very thin sort of little frames. And then just with a bit of glue, I'm just going to add those just so that they frame the apertures and it just makes them pop out a little bit. And that's my third card. So onto my fourth card. I'm taking a 6x6 card blank and I'm cutting that down to 12 centimetres wide. And then I'm taking a piece of paper and I'm cutting that to 14 centimetres tall by 11.5 centimetres wide. And I'm just going to stick that directly onto the card blank. I'm then taking a piece of red card and I'm cutting that to 13 centimetres by 10.5. And then what I've decided to do is create a patchwork effect on my card. So I'm taking different pieces of paper and I'm cutting them into various different sizes, and I'm going to arrange those on the piece of red card with sort of like a slight gap between each piece. I will put a diagram with all the measurements for these little pieces of paper at the end of the video. So when I've got all those pieces cut out, I'm just taking a bit of glue and just gluing all those in place. And then just flipping it over and adding some foam pads onto the back of that panel. Then what I've decided to do is I want to add a key with some twine. So I've taken some red and white striped twine and I'm just wrapping that round the card 3 times and just securing that there on the back. And then again I'm taking a bit more twine, doubling it over a couple of times. I'm going to wrap that through the top end of my key and then I'm just going to tie that off and attach it to the card, tying it round the twine that I've wrapped around that panel. And then I'm just trimming the ends off there to make it nice and neat, and taking the backs off the foam pads and then popping that there onto the front of the card. Then with the sentiment toppers, I'm taking the Square with Love topper, adding that in the bottom right hand corner, and then I'm just going to finish off with some gems placed in opposite corners. And that's my 4th card. So for my final card, I'm taking a piece of A4 blue card and I'm going to cut that down so it's 12 centimetres tall, leaving the length. And then I'm going to score down at 14.5 centimetres and fold that into shape. Then what I've decided to do is I want to create a gap card. So I'm going to cut the bottom section of the card off. So I'm going from the 4 centimetre mark up to the 7 centimetre mark on the other side, slitting along that line, and then I'm going from the 9 centimetre mark on the left hand side up to the 12 centimetre mark on the right hand side and cutting that, so I'm cutting out the middle section. Then taking a piece of acetate and I'm cutting that so it's 12 centimetres wide, and using some red strong double-sided tape I'm going to secure that acetate into the back of that front section that I've cut off. So just lining that up carefully there, securing it down. Then using the card as a guide, I'm just going to trim the acetate to size. And then taking the piece that I'd originally cut off the bottom adding red tape onto the back of that, and then again I'm just going to place that at the bottom of the acetate, lining up with the base of the acetate and the base of the card, and sticking that section back on, and that's going to give me what's called the gap card. Then I'm taking a piece of the floral paper and I'm cutting a piece that's 11.5 centimetres wide by 6.5 centimetres tall, and I'm cutting that to size so it fits the diagonal on that bottom section of the card. Then I'm taking another piece and I'm cutting that to 11.5 by 4.5, and again I'm just trimming that to size so it follows the diagonal on the top section of the card, and popping that there with a bit of glue. Then I've taken one of the pre-printed floral frames that come in the kit, and I'm just adding a bit of foam tape onto the back of there and adding that to the card front, sort of at a jaunty angle, slightly sort of pointing towards the right. And then I've taken the With Love sentiment topper, added that into the bottom right hand corner, and then a couple of the rosette toppers, and just added that into the middle of the frame, and I'm just adding a couple of pearl gems at the top and bottom. I'm then taking a piece of white card and I've cut that to 11.5 by 14, added that into the inside of the card blank, and then trimmed a piece of the floral paper, I think it's about 1.5 centimetres, trimmed that so it's got a sort of diagonal edge, and just added that to the bottom for a bit of decoration. And then just to finish, I decided just to add a couple of pearls into the centre sections of those rosettes. And that's my 5th and final card. So thank you for joining me today. Really hope you've enjoyed my 5 cards 1 kit video. Please give me a thumbs up and a subscribe if you did. Thank you.